Good morning, everybody. This is Martin John, and we are here to talk about the Tao Te Ching. The Tao Te Ching is an ancient text written about 600 BCE, presumably by Guy Lao Tzu. I don't like to talk too much about the origins of the Tao Te Ching. It is a text, and I receive it as the text that it is. And the reason I do that is because you can say anything, even if it is not inspired, even if it's a text that was contrived, it's still a great text to live by. And as it states, when it talks about how do you know that this is a good text? Within it, it says, how do you know the master does this? How do you know the universe is like this? How do you know? And the answer to that is always in any text, in any of the verses in which that question is posed, the answer is by looking inside myself. And I present this show, and I present the Tao and my rendition or translation of the Tao from that standpoint, from the standpoint of, I looked in myself, and the truest thing that I can find is here. The truest thing, this isn't it, right? The text isn't it. The text is, as the first chapter expresses, you can't talk about the Tao, right? You can't write about the Tao. You can't explain the Tao. You can't even really understand the Tao in logical sense in the way that we do, with proof and things. But it's there. There are so many things we can't prove, and we can just see. No, it's there. It's within me. I have a spirit. I can't find it. I can't know it. I can't know what it is because my mind is only able to gather and grasp so much. But there is so much more beyond it. Synchronicities and all sorts of things. In the universe, human beings, because of our mind, because of the fact that we embrace the manifestation, we only see a very small portion of what is actually happening. A friend of mine died of ALS not long ago. It was a couple weeks ago. Yesterday, I sat Shiva at his place. He was Jewish, obviously. And it wasn't, whatever about his religious background, but I heard a story that I hadn't heard before from his partner, and his partner is my very close friend, and how I met him. And it was about these ravens, and as he was deteriorating with ALS, he went down and he would watch ravens and stuff. And while they were at the hospital, looking out the window, you were able to see a rooftop. And as he was dying, because they decided to stop giving him the life medication or life support, and as it was going down, a raven came out and sat on the windowsill, jumped around a little bit, and it flew off. And as it flew off, Eric passed. And this is such a beautiful story, and the idea that we know that raven, it could have, we want to in our minds be oh, what a great story, this is beautiful. And many people are going to think, oh, that's just a coincidence. But we know things, when you go to those retreats and stuff, and they tell you, not retreats, but when you go to the workshops and all of those things, and they tell you, if you don't know where you're going, how are you going to get there? How can you get from here to California without knowing where California is? And how do you do that without a map? You got to have a map. You got to, well, yeah, but your desire to be in California isn't necessarily the answer, right? That's not going to get you to where you're actually going. You have a desire to get to California. Maybe that's inspired. And if it is, you're going to end up there whether you have a map or not. If you listen to your heart, you're going to go to where you're going. And you might not know where that is. So you don't necessarily need a map to have faith and trust and move forward. Of course, it's great to feel grounded But, those transitional stages in our life, when we start to lose that grounding, we have to be able to recognize that not feeling grounded is probably the standard. It's probably what we've experienced most of the history of humanity. Feeling grounded, feeling safe, that's the illusion, right? Like, the illusion is that you feel secure for your future. Most of the time, you don't know what's going to come, so you live now, in this moment. And so that's what that's what we really aspire to be, is in this moment, as we are. Yours
Hello.
truly, how are you, dear?
I'm doing really well, Martin John. I'm having a very, very nice day.
Oh yeah, well, England won yesterday, so
They did, but well, they won. That's it. That's all we need
that's
to
it.
know. That was the
Yeah,
result. They won.
that's the result. Yeah, it was not definitive, was it?
No. That was just like batting a ball around the park a little bit, really. It's like
Yeah.
a Sunday afternoon, quintessentially English bat around with a ball with a couple of pals from another country.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well, I'm
I
glad you're having a good day.
You inspired me by
What?
talking about groundedness and the need, the want, the desire to feel grounded.
Yeah.
And for me, I think of it this way, it just kind of popped into my peripherals, into my head.
Yeah.
I think that being grounded is something we are shown via parenting, education, things like that, is the desired goal. To feel grounded means you feel contented. To feel contented is a goal that people might aim for. But
Yeah,
when
that's so much destination thinking.
yes,
Like, oh, I'm here.
yeah.
And
But
now that I'm here, I don't have to do any more work. Oh,
then
good.
surely then you can feel exactly that. You can feel grounded anywhere, any place, at any time, if you want to, if that's something you'd like to experience. But it doesn't stop you from being what I call all over the shop like a dog at a fair, which is me. But even as all over the shop as a dog at a fair, I still have an idea of what I'd like to go and look at. It's an immediate idea. It's oh, look at that. And then that's been done. Oh, look at that. But I'm grounded because I'm in the fairground. And that's just that. Do you know what I mean? So
Right.
I think the grounded thing really is it depends on what you feel groundedness is. What words would you use for that?
Right. And I think all of that really does revolve around, like, our language and our relationship to that word, and
Yeah.
how we define it. And, I'm looking at, the last, the last number of generations that have defined what it feels like to, like, when you have a job, many people, you probably not so much, feel grounded, right? You feel like, oh, I have something that I could hang my hat on.
Hmm. I
I
have
have some,
purpose.
I'm married and I have, so now I don't have to worry about that anymore. I don't have to worry about that aspect of my life. I have enough money. I have a house. Now I don't have to worry about, I don't have to do anything. And then when something goes wrong, I get upset because my anchor has a kink in it,
Hmm.
you know?
It's interesting stuff because when I sit there and I think about the word grounded and all of the aspects of that, I feel that when I am looking for groundedness, that I have to carry those thoughts around with me in my head continually, even when I'm not thinking about groundedness. Somewhere in the back of my peripherals, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about groundedness. It's there, it's an element.
Well, it's an
It's
identity,
interesting.
right? Like
Yeah.
I have a job. My job is I'm a illustrator. Well, now I carry around this idea that I'm an illustrator. And then all of a sudden AI comes on and is a better illustrator than I am, and I
Yeah.
feel threatened, right? And this is where the idea of feeling grounded. This is what I'm talking about, right? Like, and of course there are so many. I mean, it's good to be grounded energetically to the earth and stuff, right? Like there's good being grounded. I'm looking at it, from that aspect of identity. And it's
Mm.
like if your identity is grounded in a definition, well then I think so much of so there's so much at risk,
Yeah.
because like now your happiness is attached to that grounded feeling, and that grounded feeling is attached to something that you are not. Like you are
Mm.
not that job, you are not that person's husband or wife, you are not like a part of you is,
Mm.
but you are not that thing. You are not wholly that thing. So you're not in control of that. You're not in control of your marriage. It's two people. You're not in control of your job. It's many people.
Mm.
You're not in control of the weather. You're not in control of, the earthquakes. You're not in control of any of it. And there was a time where we didn't seek out grounding. we
Mm.
we couldn't, because things changed so quickly, and anytime we were able to just pause and hang our clothes out on the line after washing them, we hung our clothes out, and then we walked home with a sense of fulfillment. We finished that. Now on to dinner. And it's just like, oh, we're just here in this moment. Well, what's next? What's the next most obvious thing?
I don't know. Pop your feet up. Forget the washing. Let the rain come. You can soak the washing because it'll dry one day, maybe.
That's right. That's right.
So yeah, you're right. Everything is, for me, especially how I think these days is I'm going to really enjoy each moment, take the
Hmm.
most out of each moment as it comes along. So
Right. And
if you're looking at that picture there, Martin John, that I've put up, that's an egg chair. It's a lot of money, that chair. Do you know what? That doesn't belong to me. But what does belong to me is the experience of sitting in it. How nice is that? I don't have to worry about that chair ever again. I've done that.
right.
It's lovely. I
Yeah.
enjoyed it. And now I move on.
Right.
But that's it. That's exactly how all experiences for me these days seem to be. I've had moments like I've spoken to you before, where I've had sudden appearance of high anxiety because I've realised that there is no control coming from me. There is no way I can control. And I do actually have to sit with that
Right.
and keep space so that when things do go awry, I can work with it. I can
Mm.
see what it is and work with that.
Right.
No, yeah, so it's interesting, isn't it, really? You can become quite rigid. And I think, for me, a great idea is to be as fluid as possible.
Speaking of, let's pick a number.
Okay, I'm going to go for number 63.
Problems are no problem. Be still and you will act without doing. Be still and your work will happen regularly. Be still and your senses will engage the subtle. Similarly, engage a stranger as the multitude. See the majesty of mountains in a grain of sand. The master knows greatness cannot be grasped. Remaining still, she allows greatness to flow through her. With no desire to achieve it, her stillness guides her, making subtle movements the difficult seems easy. She knows that all of life is not without its problems, so problems turn out to be no problem at all. This is exactly what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
This is exactly like when you are grounded in something, then you are holding on to that not changing, or changing in a way that benefits you in some way.
Yeah.
That is not being still. That is trying to reach out and grasp other things.
Yeah. It's almost like trying to freeze frame something so that there is no variables.
Right.
So freeze framing a situation in which you're comfortable, and the more you try to freeze frame, the more effort that takes.
Increasingly every day.
Yeah.
And at some point it's like, okay, I've not been married, but I've seen my sister be married multiple times, and all of her relationships, like, that's what happens. It's like she grasps and she's like, okay, it's okay for me to give here. It's okay for me to give here. And then it just becomes more and more and more. And that's not to say her partners haven't given in and then given in more and more. But eventually, you're both giving so much and you're both so unhappy that it just comes to a head eventually. And it's like, if you can be fluid and be honest and be open and, like, be still and you will act without doing. What that means is you're going to do something without wanting to do it, which means you might start an argument and then you can reflect on that. Or you might, you don't start an argument and then forget it. There is reflection. There's, why did I do that? What am I doing?
Mm-hmm.
What am I, is this what I want? When I talk to people and I do the whole, and I talk about the idea of, like, do you like that you did this? Do you like that you started that argument? Do you like that you engaged in that argument?
Yeah. Is there something that we can learn about ourselves in everything that we do? It's kind of quite an interesting discovery a lot of the time. Sometimes it's not the most comfortable discovery,
No.
but it's a discovery, and again, from it comes change, fluidity.
There's a line here: be subtle and your senses will engage the subtle. I see that, and I see, like, if you can be still, you can engage the subtle. It is not out of nowhere that the argument arises.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't just go, unless someone is ill in different ways, of course. But even still, if you can engage the subtle, you know what's coming.
Yeah, absolutely you do. For me, if I was going to have an argument about something, there's a build up to that, and that
Right.
is usually coming along in the lines of resentment.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I've done too much. Maybe I'm questioning why I've done too much. Maybe I'm comparing how much I've done compared to somebody else. There is that brewing time for an argument.
Right.
And what is it we are, when we do the arguing bit, what are we wanting to achieve from it? So there is an expectation as well.
Yeah. And if that's not met, we're even more upset.
Yeah. So maybe truthful honesty, fluidity, and just expression, when it's at that subtle time, could be very beneficial.
There's that one verse that talks about, like, you can hide something before it grows big. You can destroy something before it goes strong. And that's what this is addressing. It's that there's that subtle moment. And if you engaged your senses in regularly and you can experience that subtlety, you can open it up before it's, like, full of pressure.
Yeah, before it's heavy, before it becomes so big. Yeah.
It's kind of like, oh, I got a blister on my foot and it's just getting worse. It's like, oh, well, let's start healing it before you put on those shoes again.
Yeah, let's put your feet up, take a rest.
Right. Let's be still, and your senses will engage the subtle. Similarly, engage a stranger as the multitude, which means, for me, it means look, when you're in, this is the thing about the United States, you know, we made houses with attached garages, so you don't have to ever be face to face with your neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
You can just drive into the garage and then walk into the house. And when you don't face your neighbor, that's the multitude. And you engage a stranger or an individual as the multitude. Because I feel like if you were always kind of talking to your neighbor and stuff, would you go home and beat your wife?
Yeah. I've,
And
I've, I've got a nice story about that. Can I come back up in a
yeah,
minute?
absolutely, absolutely. There's
Well,
not too many nice stories about beating your wife, but
no. Let's go for a good one.
okay. But that's a big deal, you know, like I've always said, if you know, like when you face somebody, and this is engage a stranger or an individual, right, as the multitude. If you are in front of a big crowd, are you going to be the person that you don't like to be? You're going to be on your best behavior.
Mhm.
And if everybody is watching you, and and that's not to say you should be, you know, tricked into being someone that you're not, but are you proud of this that you're doing? Because if you're
Mhm.
proud of it, then you can do it in front of everybody.
Yeah, like me, I pick my nose, I break
See?
wind. I'd do
Do
that in
it.
front of anyone. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's no problem. I was also educated to say if I break wind, I'm not to say pardon me because that's the wrong etiquette. It is to be ignored,
Hmm.
apparently. But here's the story. So, as you know, I really enjoy walking around in Glastonbury. And I was having a little walk down the high street where all the shops are that sell all the things that you'd ever want to know. You've got all sorts of religious things, you've got crystals, you've got magic spells, incense, colourfully dressed people of varying degrees. And I was walking down the high street just listening. This is my thing I was going to do. Didn't really notice that I was doing it until I walked past this lovely lady, and this is what she said. She said, "Oh, I saw my neighbour this morning." She said, "I had to hide." She's a lovely woman. Now, what do you make of that, Martin John? She's a lovely woman. She talks quite a bit. I had to hide from my neighbour.
You did.
No, not me. It's
This
the
woman.
lady. I was
Yeah, yeah,
listening to
yeah. That's what I
the
thought.
conversation,
Okay.
and it blew me out of the ballpark. You're talking about this neighbour that you have who's a delightful woman that talks too much, and you are there telling another person how you've avoided talking to this lady, even though she's wonderful. Very interesting.
Wow. Um, you know, like
So
it's
then,
interesting.
when you're coming home each day and you drive your car into your carport, your garage, and then you walk through to your house and you don't meet your neighbours, does that mean that if you do talk to your neighbours, like I do, I talk to everybody, they usually run away, Martin John, I have to say, because I'm one of those neighbours that's really nice, but crikey, you don't want to get caught with them. But so you walk away, but does that mean that in your thoughts as you're driving home, if you talk to your neighbour every day, do you hope that your neighbour is not around? Do you hope that you don't bump into your neighbour because it will take just that little bit of time in your day to hold a conversation with a person? Do you know what I mean? It's very strange,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah, and I do think people live that way. And I do think and I, you know, for me, I look at it as from the standpoint of, oh, I'm talking to my neighbor. I, I,
Polite,
I have
kind.
to be something that I'm proud of.
Yeah, I don't.
And I'm, and I'm,
You know.
and I'm too tired
Yeah,
to be that. I'd rather go home and watch my guilty pleasure programming,
yes.
which I'm not proud of, and eat my processed food, which I'm not proud of,
Mm.
and drink my wine or beer or alcohol or whatever,
Or
which
gifts.
which I'm looking forward to, and I can engage with others because we can both do that.
Mm,
However, it's interesting, as somebody who's sober, I often hear people talk to me. Um, I often get people talking to me about the idea that they would like to not drink,
yeah,
and it's a real it's weird because they're drinking while they're talking to me about this, and they're telling me, and I think they're trying to get me to accept them.
mm.
And I don't care if you drink,
This
but
is the thing.
obviously
It's
you do.
accepting it themselves. That's the
Right.
thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and when I say something like, oh, it's not something you're proud of, a lot of people can plant their flag, and I do it every day, and I tell my neighbors, and I do all of this, and I do all of that. But it's like, deep down,
Do you
my
like what
guess
you're
is
doing?
that there is a second, there is, like, you're thinking twice about this, and you are.
Mm,
But you don't want to admit that, and you don't have to. I don't care if you admit it. But I know from so many people. Now, not this isn't going to be the case for everybody. Some people might not go home every night and drink. Some people might not go home every night tired. But when you're tired, you don't want to be necessarily in front of a multitude, right? As it says
yeah.
here, similarly engage a stranger as the multitude. If you're walking down the street and you treat a homeless person like trash, would you do that if all of your friends were watching you?
Yeah. Good
If all
point.
of the people that you look up to were watching you, would you treat that person poorly?
Mm.
And that's the thing that this is really, and that's why it's like, can you be present for this moment, or are you going to carry your day and you're going to carry everything that you've done as a list of reasons why you don't have to engage
Mm.
with your neighbor? Oh, I had a long day. Who cares? This moment is here. This moment is separate from that. Oh, well, I'm tired. And I'm like, well, I'm not asking much. You can sit here in the shade with me.
It's almost one of those that when you do bump into another human being, when you look at that person, or maybe you might say hello to that person, you're acknowledging the fact that they are in existence. You're acknowledging to them that they exist, and that is a token of value. It's a huge token of value. You can change somebody's whole day
Right.
by just saying hello, by just smiling at somebody.
And
It's so
not
powerful.
forcing, right. And
Yeah,
I think also not forcing them to reciprocate.
that's right. No,
So you
that's
can
it.
say hello without forcing them to reciprocate. And just like we were talking, like that person's hiding from their neighbor, but they're hiding from their neighbor possibly because they don't have the balls to say, hey, it's great to see you. I I'm not in the space that I want to communicate right now. But
That's
I don't
right.
want to, I don't have time to talk right now, but I hope you're having a great day, and we'll catch up some other time. Like when you can be truthful, right? And that's what we were saying earlier. When
Yeah,
you can be truthful to this moment, rather than being like, oh, I'm going to be trapped. It's like, there's nobody trying to trap you.
correct.
And if they don't want to listen to you, that's fine. You can still walk away. As
That's
long
right.
as you're okay with how you're treating them.
Yeah,
So if you were surrounded by your friends and you said, I'm sorry, hey, how you doing? I'm sorry, I can't talk right now, but we'll catch up some other time, and walk away. And if they're upset, whose problem is that?
correct. Absolutely.
Because
That's
if
for
you were
them to look
surrounded
at.
by your friends, you'd be okay with what you did.
Yeah,
And they would all see, wow, that lady is doing, and she isn't not engaging. And would her friends, I mean, whether they have friends or not, whatever, like, would their friends be happy with the way they treated you and the way they're talking to themselves?
mm.
That's this idea of like, similarly engage a stranger or an individual as the multitude.
The other way I think of that, Martin John, is I often pretend, and in my mind I think it's true, that other people are me in various shapes, forms, sizes,
Yeah.
circumstances, and everything. Everybody else is me. How would I like me to treat me in those situations?
Right.
That's, so knowing that higher than me is a great thing that I do with a glass when I'm doing like a chink in the glasses with a friend. So I'll hold the glass higher and I'll say, never higher than you, never lower with you, but always with you. And that's it. We are equal. We are human beings in an experience. And that person could be me and is me. So that's how I'm going to approach, address, love, and be with other people as much as I possibly can. And if the reciprocation is different than I expect, that's okay, because that's also me in a different situation, a different circumstance, a different mood, a different environment, a different body. That's okay as well. I.e., as Brad was cycling through one of the towns we went to on this cycle ride, he was on his bike and he was wheeling around the town, and he got to a junction, and there was a gentleman, a very drunk gentleman, walking up the high street, and Brad stopped and said, "You first, you first." Stopped on his bike, and the guy turned around and went, "Feck off." Back off, and he did the finger, Brad. And me and Brad both smiled. We both smiled at that and said,
Yeah.
that could be
That's
me.
where he's at. And
That's where he's at, yeah. Yeah, that's where he's at. And I get to see it. And he's doing that, so I don't have to.
and right.
My favourite.
And we're grateful for that,
Yeah, yeah,
and there's this, the master knows greatness cannot be grasped.
yeah.
Remaining still, she allows her greatness to flow through her. With no desire to achieve it, with no desire to achieve greatness. Her stillness guides her, making subtle movements. The difficult seems easy. You're not trying to do, you're not trying to be the best at something. When I was a kid, like, everybody wanted you to be the best, but they also told you there's always going to be someone better than you. But they
Yeah.
use that line so that you would still try to achieve being the best.
Yeah,
They
that's the
didn't.
one I've dropped recently. That's the one our hands up in the air. Julie has dropped that very recently. Very
Yeah.
recently, I discovered it in myself. No, what are you doing?
Right.
Why are you making this such a difficult task? Why are you making it a task at all? What are you doing? What are you
Right.
wanting to do? Just drop it. So I did.
Yeah.
I feel so much better.
Yeah. Why? Like, there's always going to be things working in the background for you, and if you can open yourself up to that those subtle movements, and you don't know what those movements are. You're just making them. You're not saying A, B, C, D, E. Maybe you can do that, but again, a good traveler may have plans, but they're not rigid.
That's
They're
right, they're
fluid,
fluid.
right?
Yeah.
Her stillness guides her. What is your stillness? What does your stillness get you to know? It says here in the beginning, be still and you will act. Without doing, without the plans, things will happen through you. Be
Mm.
still and your work will happen regularly. You will be constantly doing stuff. And you can use that as a way to complain, but that's not stillness. That's you just using that as like, oh, my day was long and I'm tired and da da da. Just keep doing what you do. Be still and your senses will engage the subtle. You'll be here in that subtle, the subtle movements that you make in your life that like, it's not about achieving things. It's about being still and allowing the subtle feeling. Oh, I feel like this needs to happen next. This is where I'm going next. This is what's next for me. I'm going to mow the lawn. I'm going to pull the weeds. I'm going to wake up early. I feel like I'm doubling down on this message, on this identity. Let me let go of that. Let me look at that. That's always going to bring you somewhere else. And you can't predict where it's going to bring you, so don't make the argument that it's not going to turn out to be a financial win. Don't make the story that it's going to lose friends. Don't pretend you know the future. Allow
Yeah,
the subtleness to guide you. And then
absolutely.
that last line, she knows that all of life is not without its problems. You're going to find problems, but if you are subtle, you're going to be ahead of them. If you engage the subtle, you're going to be ahead of them. And that last line, so problems turn out to be no problem at all.
Oh, that's superb. Absolutely superb. Martin John, thank you.
Thank you so much. It's always so wonderful to chat with you.
It's great to talk to you too.
Yeah.
I get a lot from it. Thank you
No,
so
I'm glad. Thank you. Oh, this verse, this problems are no problem. I was really excited when I wrote it, and it had so problems turn out to be no problem at all. It's not a problem. A lot of people want to say, like, what's going on in your life? Oh, here are all the problems. My car, this, my this, that, my my this, it's like, I tell people about what's going on in my life, and they tell me, oh, it's never ends, like the life of someone who owns a house, or it never ends. And it's like what they're doing is focused on the problem of the fact that they have to solve something. Well, I engage the subtle as much as I can. And even if it's not necessarily a project I want to tackle, it is a project that I will tackle because that's what it says. Now, this doesn't have to be for everybody, but it's me. Like, my experience shows me, be still and you will act without doing. Like, there are moments where I'm like, okay, I got to do this, and it's going to happen soon because I can feel it's going to happen soon, and it's not yet, not yet, not yet, now. And then as soon as it's time, I just surrender to it. And that's the acting without doing. I don't know when it's going to hit. I don't know when it's going to be time. Like, sometimes people ask me, if I'm still making paintings, and I'm like, well, I mean, in a way, but it's not the way that you may imagine at the moment. It's not the way I used to. But yes, I do still make paintings. I still make, these portraits. I mean, but my work is for a different purpose now. It's not just so I can say that I paint. It's not just so I can, show people what I do and what I make. It's all very subtle. And it's all very just, with no desire to achieve it. Her stillness guides her. It is being still. And, like, we can talk about that in the modern sort of language of boredom, right? Like, if you can be bored, you can allow yourself to be bored long enough until you get inspired to do something, then that thing that you do is going to be filled with enough energy to do it. If you occupy your time with thoughts of what you want and what you desire, and you're making money or having a relationship or all of the things, well, you are going to create that as a thing to ground to, as we were talking about in the beginning of this episode. We were talking about the idea of grounding, right? We're talking about the idea of grounding to something. And then you're going to go out and you're going to make your plans and you're going to go and get it. You're going to go get the thing that you want to ground to. And as you do that, you will further associate yourself and your life with an identity. And that identity is going to tell you what to do. And that identity, that external identity, is going to tell you where to work. And that external identity is going to tell you how to engage your emotions. And that external identity is going to tell you how to engage other people and how to, but that's not going to tell you how to engage an individual. It's going to tell you how to engage when you're being watched. All of that is your identity. When I'm being watched, I can be, the hip artist, but when I'm not being watched, I could be, a demonstrative womanizer or whatever. I mean, I know through doing my portraits that people have multiple identities. I've done portraits of people who never shared, with other people that they were engaging with, let's say, prostitutes, or they were
addicts behind closed doors. In the face of everybody else, they're not those things. They have identities, but that identity comes at a cost. That identity is something that you have that's external to you. You know, as we kind of engage the Tao Te Ching, what we find is that the answers are going to change as our relationship to Tao and ourselves change. You know, be still and your senses will engage the subtle. If you're not familiar with engaging the subtle, then your thoughts are going to go to a certain place. When I say something like, oh, do nothing, wait to be inspired, you're going to go to a very certain place because you're not attuned to the subtle, you're attuned to the conspicuous. And the conspicuous is the manifestation. And the manifestation is the creation that you have invested. Right? You built this experience. Now, if you were to engage the subtle, would your experience change? You can't know that now because you're not engaging the subtle, possibly because you're engaging the conspicuous. And the conspicuous is, I need money. I need a relationship. I need to have a kid. I need to have all of these benchmarks. I need to have a home. I need to have, and so you measure without ever kind of looking at, well, what is the subtle? There isn't a way to measure the subtle because it is subtle. It is so small. You need a micrometer to figure it out, right? Like you need this thing to measure these tiny, tiny, tiny movements. You're not going to get a prize. Nobody's going to give you a medal for, it's interesting. Like I'm going to go back to cleaning. I know that's not for everybody, but, for me, it's nice at the end of the day when, you sit down in a space that you spent time caring for. If you go out with your child or your niece or your nephew or your, a child, and you're both just present in the park and, you get an ice cream or you play ball or you play whatever, you play a game together. And you don't have your phone, your child's not looking to, or the child is not looking to be anywhere else. You have an amazing day connected. And it's just fun. Now, if you're engaging the subtle, you can see like, oh, I'm getting too much sun. Let's go to the shade. I'm a little hot. I need some water. I need some food. If you're engaging the subtle during those moments. But if you're only like swept up like the child in the movement of what's happening in this conspicuous moment, well, food is going to escape you. Water is going to escape you. The fact that you're in the sun is going to escape you, and you're not going to, and what's going to happen, you're going to get angry, just like the child. So you could be playing, and then it's like, okay, let's take a break and let's have some water, and you have to be able to bring the child back to their body because their body definitely needs to be balanced. And yes, they want to have fun. They want to play because that gets dopamine running, and that dopamine is going to override all of the needs of the body. But that child is going to be angry if you don't keep it balanced. And then later in the day, you're going to be angry. And then you guys are going to end up, I'm sure many of us have had that experience where we go out with a child, we do stuff, we lose sight of the subtle, and everything falls apart. And it's like, we were having such a good morning, and then you, and it's like, wait a minute. Why am I upset? I'm upset because I'm out of balance as well. Because I allowed my body to just enjoy the conspicuousness of having fun. Rather than watching my body enjoy the conspicuousness of having fun, but also being in touch with the subtle. There's a stillness within us, right? And that's what this is really talking about. Be still and you will act without doing. because you're going to be still and you're going to engage the subtle. You're going to see what's going on inside, not just what is happening externally, not just what's happening in the conspicuousness of your body. Be still and your work will happen regularly. That means you will just, like, even being with that child, your work internally, your work externally, your work in all aspects. Be still and your senses will engage the subtle. And that's the big thing. Let yourself engage the subtle, and then you'll find your work. Then you'll find out how to act. That subtleness, it's all in there. And it's like when you can engage the subtle, because you can say like, oh, wait, I'm greedy. Now, you might not be greedy on a measurement that is, like that has, what's his name? Like all like Elon Musk and all those on a scale. You don't have Putin on the measurement scale that you're judging your greediness for. However, you still feel like there's a part of you that can release some greed. Because it's not about measuring you against other people. It's about measuring you and the subtleness of how you feel about yourself, how you feel about your actions. You can be less greedy. Okay. Recognize that. Now, you don't have to necessarily do anything about it now, but recognize it, bring it into your awareness, and grow. Allow yourself to be like, oh, there's parts of me that I know can be better. There's parts of me that I can engage differently. Similarly, engage a stranger as the multitude. That line really kind of talks about this idea of like, do you endorse all that you do? Can you sit in front of, the multitude? Can you stand in front of millions of people and all these people, like all the people of your life, all your ancestors, all the people that have supported you throughout your life, all the people that love you, and do what it is you're doing right now? Can you be 100% yourself? Is there nothing that you do that you are afraid people will find out about? Is there nothing that you do that you're not proud to be doing? And that doesn't mean that you have to be proud of everything. It just means that you have to acknowledge the fact that this is where you're at. And, okay, I'm not proud that, I don't know, I don't brush my teeth at night. Okay, well, I'm not proud I don't brush my teeth at night. Well, can I brush my teeth at night? That's something that's so silly. But if it brings me into a state of not being proud that I do it, or not being happy that I do it, or I don't like that I engage in this way, if that's the case, then I do have to question it, because that's the subtleness. The subtleness is, I don't like that I'm engaging in this way. It's like, oh, I'm tired, I don't want to go to, that's fine. But if you have a thought about it at all, other than that's just the way it is, then that's the subtle. That's the subtle that we want to look at. See the majesty of mountains in a grain of sand. The grain of sand is, I don't brush my teeth at night. The majesty of the mountain is, let's put this up, in the grandest light. Yours truly, you can join me again if you want. I don't know, you say you have a question. I'd be happy to address the question. I mean, I don't have answers, but go ahead.
It's just as I'm listening to you, because I do listen for a very long time when you're talking, and the way that your mind works and your words come out and gets me thinking, and gets me kind of having a look, observing, noticing things. And this came up for me. When I am addressing the multitude, do I think to myself, the multitude has many kind of foibles like I do? In other words, I am not perfection. I'm not perfection, and that is okay. When I'm addressing a multitude, do I think the same? Do I allow that? Do I do it with no judgment? That's my question.
Well, you're asking me if you do something? I couldn't tell
No, no,
you.
no. I'm asking it when we're thinking about this
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
thing. Is this a good way to kind of think about things? You know,
Well,
and when we are looking and stuff, instead of sort of saying, "Oh, you know, they probably, you know, they're perfect," almost is what we think when we look at everybody else. They've definitely not got the same kind of issues that we have, that we are trying to like or not like that we're doing this. But we are. That's what keeps us as connected as we are. Is we all do have these things that we might want to subtly notice. And so when
right,
addressing a neighbour, just bear that in mind.
right. And yeah, I mean, exactly. And we want to, but that still kind of gets us into measuring.
Yeah, that's what I don't want to do that. That was my
Right.
point in
Yeah,
saying
so that's a
that.
difficult, it's like anytime we look outside of ourselves
Mm.
to make it okay to be ourselves, we will
Yeah,
find a limit there. There is a limit to how much we can be ourselves because
yeah,
we're not actually engaging ourselves. We're engaging ourselves under the stipulation that someone else is doing the same thing. Someone else is, that means that eventually we will find somebody else that is better and we're not good enough. That
yeah.
is
I don't
that
know
is
if
that's
it
a
is though.
slippery slope.
For me, I don't think of it that way. What I'm
No,
trying
I
to
understand.
say is, when you're looking at another person or you're having an interaction with another person, it's good to kind of know that they are themselves on a journey. They are experiencing similar to you in whichever way it is. And it is. It's called life. It's called
Hmm.
living life. So to do that openly and acceptingly of all kind of foibles, all things, you know, so that when you do step outside, you can just be yourself. You can be the person that maybe spends £10 a day on a gambling machine, i.e.
Yeah,
me.
yeah, yeah. And there's
And you can quite
absolutely,
happily tell, yeah, you can
yeah,
tell the world that.
right.
And
And
you
you
can
can
say, I
tell the
do
world
that,
that,
and I don't like that I do that. But
right.
that's
So,
okay.
so,
I'm,
so there is. This is where that subtleness comes in, right? It's not okay. I mean, it is. It's okay. It just is.
it is.
Right. It's not that it's okay because okay is like what it is you have this, you have subtle thoughts about this. You may have conspicuous thoughts about this as well. But
Yes.
and you have and very often, and I know this as someone who comes out of addiction, what we do is we double down on being proud of not being who we subtly want to be.
Do
And
we
so
do that?
what ends up happening is we look outside of ourselves for
To validate.
increasing, right, increased validation or give us a reason to. If I were to ask somebody, like, why are you getting sober? And they had any other answer than because I want my life to be better or because I want to love myself more, then
Mm.
it's anything other than that, it can go away. I remember one person, I interviewed one person, he said, I started my journey to sobriety and I was saying in the rooms, I was saying, I am going to be sober for my son and stuff. And then someone asked me, what happens if your son dies?
Yeah.
Because like, that's the thing, like, anytime you push off, like the only reason that you should want to do anything is because you want to love yourself more. Like,
Yeah.
but anything that you can use to get to a place of understanding that you're worthy of more love, of course, use that. This is where we're talking about the depths of subtleness and stuff like that. Because when you engage the subtle, you start to really understand that, oh, you know what? I don't love myself in these areas. Or I am looking outside of myself in these areas. And that's fine. But we have to recognize and become aware of those things. And so when we look at our neighbor and when we look at the multitude, we say, they have problems too. Yes, but that doesn't have anything to do with you. And
No, and it
if they
doesn't.
didn't have problems, or if you don't have problems, do you then get a free pass to look down on them? No. So once we start sort of measuring, the measuring doesn't it will stop, because you will become attached to the subtle. But again, when we start looking outside of ourselves, we're looking at the conspicuousness. We're not looking at the subtle, because the
Yeah, the
conspicuousness is, of
measurement
course, they
thing.
have problems.
The measurement thing for me is really something I have questioned in myself quite often. It's something that keeps coming round in a circle in various different forms. This measuring. I wonder where it comes from. I wonder where
You know,
it comes
like you say that, and I'm just like, you were like you were raised in an orphanage. Like there's no
from.
there's no place in which measurement is, like, you are introduced and raised in a world that is constantly measuring you. Like day and night. Like you were never separate. You were never an individual. Like you people may have tried to treat you like an individual, but you always knew there was somebody else there, and if they got sick, they would get the attention, and if they got, if they were good, they would get the attention, and within the group, if you were weak and you had to go along with the group anyway. Like everything that for survival is
Comes from
measurement.
measurement.
Yeah, it comes
Yeah.
from measurement. Right.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. One day in my future, maybe I can truly let go of measurement.
It's a big deal, and that's and as we're talking about this idea of coming home and like there is like when you're being measured, even if that penetrates into your house, right, into your life that nobody else can see. There's nobody watching, but you're still the one measuring. You're still an outside observer somewhere inside of you, judging and measuring you. And that's the subtle, right? Can you recognize the subtleness of you being your nemesis?
Yeah. That is awesome, Marjorie. We've got right down to it there. We've definitely pinned the nail on that proverbial donkey.
and there are so many ways to avoid that, right? To avoid really looking at it, avoid really kind of taking that seriously by saying, no, I do all these things and this is me and this is who I am. And it's like, well, all of that you are is just bullshit identity that you use to, be conspicuously you. And the subtleness is, there's pain and there's hurt and there's influence that you're living under that you don't really want to live under. You've just become accustomed to living under for 60 years or whatever.
Yeah. It's very interesting, isn't it? Isn't it lovely to be able to understand that number one toolbox tool, observation and noticing.
Yeah.
That's the biggest one. That's my power tool in my box. Yeah.
And that's why,
great.
that's why we engage stillness. You let your stillness guide you rather than your identity, rather than the conspicuousness of whether it's a measurement or an expectation or anything else. You let that stillness be there. Because yes, there's going to be struggles ahead, and there's going to be, things that you're going to have to deal with. But if you carry every struggle you've had, you're going to sit there and say, but I've been doing this for 6 years and I should be better. It's like, stop it. You're here now. Like, that's okay. Be still here.
Yeah. In fact, for me, it's kind of, good God. I mean, I every year, right, Martin John, there's just one more thing before I go. Every year I do a little video, and it's me on my birthday. And I say this, I need nothing from anyone on my birthday, but I celebrate it. And the reason I celebrate it so excitedly, ecstatically, all on my own, and I do this video so I can watch it later, is because when I start to think about getting through and beginning another year, I think that is the best. I get so excited about it. All those things that ever happened to me mean nothing, but they mean everything all at the same time because I'm here right now. And that is the biggest gift ever you can receive on your birthday. So I celebrate that way. I go, pop, I open this bottle of my favourite juice, which is Oyster Bay. I never finish it. I usually have one swig, and I say, happy birthday, me. And I get bloody excited that I've made it again. Do you know what I mean? I really, really do.
Yeah.
So that's it. All of those struggles previously, all of those things that might have gone wrong, have gone wrong, all those problems that have been and gone as well, continual change. I celebrate all of those and the fact that I'm here and I get to experience. That's it for me. Way! That's kind of fine. Thank you so much for having me up again. I'm glad you've kind of helped me with that question a little bit more. Thank you.
Absolutely. Love you, dear. Thank you all for joining me. It's 7, and we're gonna start wrapping up. 6 a.m. Central Time. So this an hour ago I started. So if you're looking at your watch, and you can figure out what time I come on, and you can join me. You can just come up. We'll chat a little bit, and then I'll ask you to pick a number between 1 and 81, and then we'll go through the Tao of the day. Today we went over number 63. Problems are no problem. And it reads, be still and you will act without doing. Be still and your work will happen regularly. Be still and your senses will engage the subtle. Similarly, engage a stranger as the multitude. See the majesty of mountains in a grain of sand. The master knows greatness can't be grasped. Remaining still, she allows greatness to flow through her. With no desire to achieve it, her stillness guides her. By making subtle movements, the difficult seems easy. She knows that all of life is not without its problems, so problems turn out to be no problem at all. Problems are just part of life, and so they're no problem. You know they're coming. It's okay. Let's be here. Let's be present. Let's know and love who we are. All right, thank you so much for joining me. I'm Martin John. If you're interested in contacting me, you can do so at my website, martinjohn.com, which you can find at my profile here on Noom Vibe. I also have copies of my Tao Te Ching, which is what I read here every day, and you can pick that up on my website as well. Thank you so much for joining me, and until next time, keep recovering yourself.